and I will screen share. Perfect. Yeah, so there's a couple of things we can do. One is checking with Felix whether or not he can join us in the consensus we currently have among Marc-Antoine, Timothy, and I on basically all of these. I think some of them Felix already checked off his name either way. The other thing we can do now that we have more or less consensus on usable claim, except the definition of structurally linkable, which is used in usable claim, wants to load. We could indeed also go to the user stories, where this all comes from, and start adding some next user stories that then define the nouns we have to define next, essentially. Because so far we've actually only been talking about one user story, and it's been predominantly the one that I wanted to talk about. And it's pretty cool because we now have agreement on that we actually all want this. And then later we can see where that fits into a bigger whole of the system. But yeah, I think it makes sense, Felix, since you're here, and that's a rare occasion nowadays, that we see, that we check off with you whether or not you agree on these.
Sure.
So I see you already agree on immutable, externally linkable. Well, I guess I didn't check the names.
Yes. Non-claim, I think. That
Yes.
was immutable claim, and we removed the immutable. We changed it. We made it because immutable is an adjective. So
exactly.
Claim,
we removed the immutable part.
Okay. Let me read.
So it's essentially the same. We just removed the immutable part of claim. Everything else, the examples and everything has stayed the same.
Yep. Okay, that's good for me.
And yeah, the reason for doing that obviously was we can jump there, because we now can talk of immutable claim simply by combining the adjective with the noun, and then we have the same thing essentially.
Yeah, that's very useful.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you can notice, we applied labels. So the blue ones are adjectives, the green ones are nouns. Yeah, declarative sentences, of course, unchanged. So the three main ones we've been talking about the past meetings is accepted as, candidate, and usable claim. The main one we wanted was usable claim. Ironically, what we discovered is that usable claim doesn't require accepted nor candidate. Eventually, what was necessary with other things. Regardless, we made a lot of progress on candidate and accepted as we can go over. Candidate is the current description. Information successfully submitted by a user or any actor for use as a specific domain type that warrants a bit of discussion maybe, with associated acceptance criteria to be well formed in the system. Whether the information satisfies this criteria or not is unknown. The information hasn't been accepted as the domain type yet. So this is really hinting at the process of you submit something as intended to be something. That's a language Marc-Antoine and I used before, intended as, but this thing tries to make that more, well, explicit.
So it's something that just entered the process.
Yeah, so examples are you submit the earth is not flat as a claim, but you can also add by Viagra exclamation mark as a claim. Both are candidates. It doesn't matter that they would be accepted or not, both are candidates.
So every claim can be a candidate just by saying it is a candidate.
Yes, I'm saying by making a submission of a certain, what we now call domain type.
Yep.
But it's what is important is that this is a kind of template. It's candidate of something. Like the earth is not flat is a candidate for, could be submitted as a claim candidate, and then it would eventually be validated. It could be entered as an entity definition candidate, and then it would not be validated. It's candidate as something. With the
when you say
form.
Validated, Marc-Antoine, I guess you mean accepted as? Or?
Accepted as, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's essentially quite elaborate for something fairly trivial, but regardless, it's made explicit now. So yeah, it was hard to find exceptions that didn't match a definition, anything that's not submitted. Any information submitted that never has acceptance criteria. That's a fairly important one that I added after, I think, because if anything is post would pass regardless? Is it still a candidate? Isn't it just a submission? So candidate implies some type of acceptance criteria. Mark Antoine then highlighted, oh, but these acceptance criteria might not actually be known yet. It's known that there exist acceptance criteria, but they don't necessarily have to be known yet. So we leave that open, which is also fine.
So maybe they're only in the heads of the people. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe we don't have strict formal acceptance criteria for claim versus entity, but we know that we know it when we see it, even if they've not been defined.
Yeah.
And we know we can accept, we can have a process, a group process to accept something as claim versus entity.
It is religious language to talk about the process of going from a candidate to accepted. That's actually all it is in short. Edge cases. Text submitted to a system with multiple possible domain types, but it's not stated yet which one it is. Like we try talking about it from different angles. I mean, you can either say, well, that's a union type submission, which you could consider a domain type. But yeah, we didn't think an elaborate discussion that was warranted. So we just listed as an edge case. Information submitted to a system for which acceptance criteria are not yet defined, but are supposed to exist. I don't even remember this one.
Well, that's the...
Oh, didn't we say matches definition in the end?
Yeah, that should match the definition.
Okay.
Because
yeah, you can argue either way. I think I'm more on board now with matches definition, but yeah, let's call it an edge case. It's fine either way.
Because of the information matches, these criteria are not as unknown being added afterwards. We didn't.
Could we move it? I mean, I've from what we have now, I'm okay with adding it to matches definition.
Yeah.
What's also not perfectly clear to me is the domain. What exactly do you mean with domain? That's
the same question I had. So I was arguing I would just call it type because I mean, domain type doesn't say much more, but Timothy preferred to use domain type to refer to the software engineering practice of a domain type. Like what we're essentially referring to, I think, is nouns in the glossary. You submit something as a claim, you submit something as maybe even a declarative sentence. But we landed just on domain type and decided not to talk about it much further because it's not really that important.
Okay, so the term comes from like domain modeling.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I thought it was valuable to distinguish from, elementary base types like string and integer. Those don't have validation criteria in the same way, right? It's
so candidate, the definition is independent of claim. It's like anything that goes through an
you could be an entity candidate
process,
argument candidate, definition
anything,
candidate, frame candidate.
Anything that's a domain type, essentially, right? And then we can move the discussion to what a domain type is. But I think we indeed said we're not going to do that.
We decided the main type was a primitive concept.
Okay,
and,
but
it didn't need definition.
But the important thing is that it will go through a acceptance process.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that is really key. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we should make this explicit. Is it?
It is, right?
No.
With associated.
No.
Okay.
I disagree.
Go ahead, Timothy.
Specifically because we want the language there, so I can say something like, I think candidate type should be structurally linkable, and I think that there should never be an acceptance, and it should always be a candidate. Using that language, I'm allowed to say that because we haven't built into that it will necessarily be accepted at some point as part of the definition.
Sorry, it's a bit unclear to me what you disagree with, Timothy. Can you be most explicit about what you disagree with?
Putting in the definition of candidate that it must go through an acceptance process.
Okay. But isn't it in there now?
Yeah,
that's my understanding as well. But I think.
I mean, what if
it's not a guarantee that it will be accepted. It's a guarantee that it will go through the process and be either accepted or refused.
Okay, what do we call things that are submitted but aren't going to go through an acceptance process?
Submissions, I would call them. I think it warrants using different vocabulary for stuff that doesn't need to be accepted.
I would also, one possible way to argue this, I'm not saying it's right, but it's a possible way, is if something doesn't have an acceptance process, it's auto-accepted upon submission.
Yes.
Then it gets in the accepted state.
Yes, I also find that a useful way of talking about it. Without introducing alternate vocabulary. Yeah.
But it's true that we should then make clear that accepted doesn't require the acceptance process to exist, unlike candidate.
Right. So then I should say, like, I think spam should be accepted on submission. I think candidate claims should always be accepted on submission.
Yeah,
okay.
You could express it like that. And then that would be a disagreement, probably. But I mean, I think we understand each other clearly at that point.
Okay.
Felix, to go back to what you stated, so you don't think that's clear enough right now in the current description? Do you have a suggestion for a rewrite?
Yeah, I mean, it's only clear because I attended past sessions, I guess. Let me read it again. Wait.
It is, I actually agree, it's not the nicest prose, but something we agreed on at some point.
Yeah, it's a bit.
It reads messy.
Mangled, yeah.
I think putting the in the system clause immediately after submitted would already help. Submitted in the system by a user or any actor for users, blah, blah, blah. It would
to
already,
the system.
To the system is fine.
I'm missing a bit this part, like will go through an acceptance process.
Let's see.
Thing. Because that's the key part, and I don't see that key part in there.
With associated, we can make it so
like something with associated acceptance
way.
Criteria is like a bit fuzzy because it's about a process, and the process can have criteria or not. Maybe there's a random process or whatever, right?
I think acceptance criteria are part of the definition very much. The domain as acceptance criteria are associated to the domain type. Okay, sure.
So like because the domain type itself has a process. Like yes. every different domain type has a different process probably.
Correct. Correct.
So the process that's associated with that domain type, this instance of that domain type will go through the process. Like, yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm happy with that formulation.
This is still convoluted. The domain type is an associated set of acceptance criteria which determines what it means for it to be well formed. This sounds very convoluted, but it is what I want to say regardless.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, it's better than the previous sentence.
Yes.
This might be the secondary definition or elaboration, actually.
I have a question. Is well-formed distinct from accepted?
Well-formed distinct from accepted? Well,
I think a different concept? I'm not sure.
Yes, because something can be well-formed without it being accepted.
And vice versa. Okay, fair enough. Maybe we'll need to define.
My main question is, what is the relation exactly between well-formed and acceptance criteria? I mean, the acceptance criteria define what it means to be well-formed. So in essence, they're almost similar. But I mean, it's just that the main reason for there being acceptance criteria is because it determines what well-formed is.
I think there's a bit of circularity here. Maybe how about which aim to determine what it means for it to be well-formed? Because they are hopefully aligned, but we don't know that they are.
I'll tell you something. I know where this is probably going to go is accepted. Accepted is way too monolithic, right? It's accepted for this, accepted for that, because accepted for linking, accepted for viewing by the public, accepted for different things might have different levels of criteria.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, I think that's where this is eventually going to go.
Okay, that's interesting, because that's not what we understood to be the definition of accepted, but you're raising a useful point. I think accepted means well-formed enough. And then the question of, are there levels of acceptance even for well-formedness? Like there may be successive tests which are more and more demanding, and we know it at least fulfills these criteria. And then there's more stringent criteria that are more
these different domain types?
No, on one domain type, I can imagine a scenario where I have some criteria that are easy to apply and some criteria that are difficult to apply. So we first apply a certain level.
Yeah, okay, but see, this is why I didn't like domain type. If you keep it open and you call it type, these are just different types, and types have different criteria. And I mean, I don't see why.
No, I don't think so. I'm saying, let's speak about claim. Let's be concrete.
Mm-hmm.
We have criteria for claim, and then somebody says, well, at least this. Like, for example.
Yeah, why wouldn't that be like a usable claim or a textual claim or a non-indexical claim, and then you simply add acceptance criteria and it inherits the ones from the, I don't see why that is different from this.
I'm not sure I understand your
if
point
you
by that.
add additional acceptance criteria on top of the existing ones, say claims and non-indexical claims. Non-indexical claims is a subset of claims.
For example,
like all the acceptance criteria of claims still exist. Like the type in this case of intended submission, the domain type is a non-indexical claim. It's no longer a claim. It's a non-indexical claim, which is a different domain type than a claim. It might be a. It might be a.
Okay, but I could see a process whereby I say I think this is a non-indexical claim, and somebody checks it and says, you know what, it's not fully non-indexical because you missed that reference, but it's still a claim. So at least we have it's passed the claim criteria, but not the indexical claim, even though it was intended for indexical claim. So it's accepted as a claim, even if it's not accepted as an indexical claim, to which it's still a candidate, or it can be refused, which is
but the submission was as a non-indexical claim in this.
No, I'm in my theory. I'm saying in my example. I'm saying let's suppose I'm saying it is non-indexical. Oh, that's what you said. Sorry. Yes, the submission is as non-indexical claim, so it would be rejected as that, but it would still be accepted as claim.
Yeah, so this language doesn't say that you can submit a candidate as both a non-indexical claim and as a claim, and it could be accepted as a claim, but not as a non-indexical claim.
Fair.
We can leave that open. The domain.
I formulated something in the chat. Maybe that helps. This is how I think about it.
Doesn't see that it's. I'm not sure respective is.
And the process we want to decouple, but yeah, it's more about the criteria.
Because yeah, I still think like the candidate only can exist because of the existence of a process. Like a candidate itself, for what candidate is always for something.
Yes,
right?
That's there. But it's. I agree with you. It's with the process.
But the process is fundamentally there because of the criteria. But
yeah, I was going to say that but you can abstract out the criteria from the process.
I think process is more general than criteria, but
that is correct.
Yeah,
it is more general. But I think here we do mean criteria and not process. I think we do mean the more specific.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's fine for me. I just wanted to write down what I had in my head.
But up to a point, 1 second, just you do have a point that if, for example, the criteria are not yet known or not yet formalized as per the definition, what we have otherwise is a process. So maybe that way, Felix is right to say that maybe it is we do mean the general case.
If, for example, just a group of people has to accept it, but there are no criteria, but the group of people decides if something gets accepted, then that's still something that could work for the canonical debate, I guess, in theory, right? And that the criteria are in people's heads.
But okay. I'm fine either way, I think. I mean, it's just looking at the same thing just from a process perspective. But I mean, the process implies that there's some criteria, and yeah, they may be loosely defined, just like the process can be loosely defined, which we do now. I think it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the thing is, like right now, for who do we write these definitions? For us or for other people? Because right now we all know what we're talking about.
No, it should be publishable, so to speak. So yeah, we have to be careful enough about that. The domain type has associated acceptance process, ideally in the form of acceptance criteria.
Acceptance process, typically with associated acceptance criteria. And this highlights what you said, Mike Antoine, that sometimes vague.
Yeah.
Which aim to determine whether the information is well formed. The latter part is for me actually less important. If anything would be dropped, it's that, because there can be many reasons. I mean, I actually know that
it sounds like a criterion to me already.
Yeah, exactly. Being well formed is a criteria, but I mean, I do also agree that I can't think of any other reasons for acceptance criteria for the sake why we're adding this.
Well, that's what Tim was bringing up, and he was right. I mean, there's accepted for linking, for publishing, for this, for that. And I do think we're trying to make it a bit not abstract, but is this acceptable as such? And then we can have, to be linkable, it has to be of this type. To be, for example, let's take the example we had. I think it's a good one. Claim versus non-indexical claim. You could say the requirement for publishing, it's usable for publishing if it's at least a claim, but it's to be linked, it should be non-indexical, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to say that
these are acceptance criteria. So well formed here is simply a different way of saying acceptance criteria, and what well formed means depends on the domain type. So I think this is superfluous, this whole thing.
What I'm trying to say is ideally the candidate and type and this and that should be about the nature of the claim, and the fact that this system chooses to only accept claims of a certain nature for a certain usage, that's a system level constraint, but it says nothing about the nature of the claim and the acceptance criteria. So if you say my acceptance criteria for linking, for internal linking, for example, are this and this and this and this, it's not about saying that it changes the nature of the claim. It's your system chooses to only accept claims of this nature and the acceptance criteria about the nature of the claim for this usage. Does that make sense, Tim?
Yeah.
Trying to detach this is about candidate. It's not candidate for usage, it's candidate for a nature, and then a system may decide I'll only take this nature for this usage.
But isn't that covered by being an instance of a domain type already?
But that's the point. Is it like Tim was introducing usable for what? Usable for usages, and I'm saying, well, usable for usages should not exist abstractly. It's usable for, 1 second, it's a bit too verbose. Usable for usage should be defined. It's a system level that says use this nature, and yeah, basically I'm rejecting tying the notion of acceptability to usage. I'm saying it has to do with domain type and not with usage.
I lost track of how usage came into this discussion.
That was Tim's point about usable for linking, usable for publication, usable for this, that, or the other.
Well, I mean, they're analogous. One can be mapped to the other, right? Because all you do is for the usage, you name something as you create a new domain type, right? You say, okay, I want to use it for linking. I'm going to create a linkable claim, as a domain type, and you've mapped it, right?
Mhm.
The question is, can one claim be multiple things at once, multiple domain types?
Mhm.
Sure.
Which we
Okay.
said yes.
Yeah, in which case it's analogous. Usable for turns into usable as, right?
No. Okay, it is still not getting my point. I'm trying to detach usable for. Okay, the nature of the claim, like for example, indexical, non-indexical, that's what the claim is. And then usable for linking. Now, in a system may demand that the claims be non-indexical. Another system might not demand this. The acceptance criteria don't change. The acceptance criteria for linking change, but the acceptance criteria for being non-indexical don't change. It's just a system setting that are indexical claims accepted or not for linking.
I think the what we're disagreeing or not aligning on here really is domain type.
Maybe.
Domain type can be anything. That's why I just said keep it open as type. Marc Antoine, you're coming more at it from a of a type system angle, probably. Timothy maybe more from a software engineering abstract type, but the thing is, it can be anything. It's neither of these. We haven't defined it. That's why I was insisting, let's just call it type. If we don't have any clear agreement on what it is, it can be anything, just like we otherwise write something. It's nothing inherently different.
And I'm trying to be more precise about what I mean by domain type and to exclude definitions which are based on usage.
But then we need to, if this is going to lead to a misunderstanding, then we have to define what a domain type is.
I agree.
But I still think it's irrelevant to this definition. For me, just type,
Correct.
It doesn't matter.
Correct. I think
agree.
it's irrelevant to this definition. Tim?
I'm fine with that. I don't have any reason for it yet.
But where we started was, do we want to keep this, the sentence that's currently highlighted?
I vote yes, because it shows that it's about the structure of the information and not about intended usage.
I think it's redundant and already covered by the instance of domain type. But
I'm fine either way, but I agree with Felix.
Keeping it doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Okay. So information successfully submitted to the system by user or any active user as a specific domain type. The domain type is an associated acceptance process, typically with associated acceptance criteria, which aim to determine whether, it's definitely better than what we start with. Whether the information satisfies these criteria or not is unknown. The information hasn't been, yeah,
and then you can rule. Yeah.
Okay. If everyone is happy with this, we can add Felix to the list. If nobody wants to retract their alignments.
I just say that the second edge case could move to match definition.
Fully agreed. Anyone that objects?
Didn't even fully understand it yet. So yes.
Information submitted. So it means acceptance criteria. Ooh. What am I doing today?
TBD.
No, to be decided.
It's interesting that in this example you say information instead of domain type.
But the information is of a domain type.
Also, yeah. Okay. Didn't see that one. Okay. Yep. Works for me.
Yeah, because now it's clearly incorporated, so it didn't make sense as an edge case. Cool. Timothy, one time, second time, still happy or not?
Sure.
It doesn't sound too convincing, but okay, let's proceed. I'm gonna add this to consensus. Accepted as then should be a bit easier because it relies on a candidate contribution once it has been approved by an individual, community, or community process. This is something we agreed on even before Felix. As conforming to the acceptance criteria, we might have to change it for that domain type. Yeah.
As the process, and the other reason we might have to change it is we've now determined that if there's a domain type which does not have acceptance criteria, it's automatically accepted. So it's not all, it wasn't always a candidate.
We can do that. I'm fine with that. I mean, yeah, I mean, but it's more like a secondary way of suggested way of talking about it. A contribution once it has been approved. So this is still correct. In case, yeah, I don't know. So how do we write
the acceptance the acceptance process for that domain?
But that's this.
Past the process, maybe. Yeah, I mean, approved is already says everything, right?
Typically, we can just as conformity and acceptance criteria.
Yeah, that's good.
And then we can add. What did you just say, Marc-Antoine?
A domain type without acceptance process. Can be stated to, without being a candidate.
Yeah, I think that works.
Won't win literary prizes, but good enough.
Yep, looks good to me.
Anything else on this one? Lastly, usable claim. This is where it gets nice because then we can go to the user story list. To reiterate, we're talking about the user story. As a web author, I want to link to a usable claim in a claim repository so that my readers can support and oppose the usable claim, which is also visible to any web content linking to the same usable claim. So the qualities of this thing, this entity, are basically derived in order to support that use case. It needs to be immutable. If it's not immutable, it won't be the same thing that people are talking about over time. So it needs to be very clear when you point to something, what it was you're pointing to. In order to be able to point to something, it needs to be externally linkable. That's that one. And then lastly, it needs to be structurally linkable. That points to the fact that you need to be able to add supporting and opposing claims to it. If you can do that, maybe because you decide that it needs to be accepted first before it becomes structurally linkable. That's how we decouple this. Then it's not a usable claim. So a claim that you can't use as supporting claims in another claim, we don't call a usable claim. That's in essence what it is saying. Unfortunately, structurally linkable isn't defined yet, but that's the quick informal version of what we're aiming at here. So this is a placeholder essentially for a later process. I agree with Marc-Antoine, it would be nice to spend the next 20 minutes on this thing, on the user stories list. Questions in terms of this?
That means that the user story explicitly means we have immutable claims. Like we don't have a mutable claim with a version history and the current claim in time. It's always, everything's always pointing to specific versions, right? That's what's meant by this.
In this, but it doesn't exclude from a usable claim linking to later versions. That's orthogonal to this. But a claim you link to links to one specific claim. Marc-Antoine, I see you added claim there. I seem to recall we intentionally did not do that because a claim, according to the current definition, matches these definitions.
What's
so
again?
It's interesting that a usable claim is not necessarily a claim according to this definition.
Why not?
Because the way we define claim is very much along as already having been accepted according to these criteria, and we the claim pretty much incorporates the acceptance criteria for a claim, you could say.
Let me think. No, I think that's fine. No, it isn't. You're right.
It isn't because these
No,
match
you're
a
right,
definition,
you're right.
these don't.
You're right. I see what you're saying. So if we want to include, if we want to allow candidate claims to be usable, okay, okay, that's a bit interesting because I want to be able to speak about claims, whether they're acceptable or not. So maybe what
you need a superset of candidate and accepted claims, basically, or acceptable claims.
And what I'm saying is this long list we have, maybe we should rename that as accepted claim and have a separate claim, you know, for the abstraction of either candidate, includes candidate claims or accepted claims.
But the thing is, this is decoupling the process. This is what a claim intends to be, right? But it would be wrong to say that this is an accepted claim, because an accepted claim would be one that was a candidate and got accepted by a process. Do you remember that whole discussion we had before with like...
Yeah. But what I'm saying is all those criteria, they're about acceptance, aren't they?
Yeah, in a way. That's...
So I'm saying, what you're saying is either we lack, I mean, okay, either way, it's clear we lack something that includes accepted and candidate claims, which is what we want to use, right? We want a name for that. I think that name should be claim. And then we...
But remember that a usable claim is not necessarily accepted. We decoupled the acceptance.
I agree. And this is why I'm saying it should be here an immutable claim. And then claim.
But not an immutable accepted claim, right?
I agree totally. But what I'm proposing to do is to rename the claim card to accepted claim, create a claim card which is accepted claims or candidate claims, and that would be claim. And this is what this usable claim would point to.
Are we going in circles here a bit?
We are, because if you do that, then you're claiming that a usable claim always has to be a candidate or usable. And yes. I guess it can be.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we're going in circle.
Because I thought like the definition of claim incorporates the acceptance criteria.
Yeah, so I'm saying this card, which has the acceptance criteria, should be accepted claim. Or maybe we need to get back to acceptable claim.
But then there's
this would be one example of accepted claims according to us, essentially.
What would be an unaccepted claim there? Just a random piece of information?
The buy Viagra is a very good example of a rejected claim. We don't have a card for it, but rejected claim is a candidate claim that didn't pass the acceptance criteria and was rejected.
I'm not saying rejected, but like
not accepted.
What did we say? A claim candidate.
A candidate claim is a
candidate. Yeah. So does a candidate claim? Okay, so it doesn't have all these criteria that it has to be a claim, something people can believe in or not.
Yes.
Thing, right? It doesn't. It just can be like the candidate claim can be a random piece of information.
Yes, and somebody claims that it's a claim, and that meta claim can be rejected or accepted.
Okay.
So I think what I'm proposing does make sense.
Yeah. So Marc-Antoine, to reiterate, you're proposing that
this card
is reworked into, because it cannot just be renamed. If we rename it to accepted claim, all of these, we need to do what we did before. It needs to be something. I'm sorry for the drilling noise in the background. Very annoying.
What do we need to do?
Then all of these examples as approved by the CDL community, essentially.
Yeah.
And we did something similar before, remember?
Yep. I mean, because it's
I mean, I think I agree what you're aiming for here. And it's essentially the list of criteria, this. But we even want more criteria, remember, because this is a really minimal, it can still be indexical and stuff. And that's why calling this accepted claim is a bit problematic. Because I think we want more criteria than this for it to be accepted by us. So in a way, this is more about the acceptance criteria, like a certain subset of claims.
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking maybe we do want the notion of acceptable claim, or
maybe this is the basic claim or something, a basic accepted claim.
Okay, this is okay. Let me think.
Well, we still agree, but it's a naming problem, right?
No, I agree. Okay, there's two different problems that are mixed in this. One is we're speaking about layers of criteria. It's about, for example, the non-indexical is, I don't think is part of this. And it's another layer, it's another type, and it's another adjective. Standalone, maybe, whatever. There's the notion that sometimes we'll want to speak about valid claims, that is, claims that have not been through the process but would be accepted by the process, right? And maybe that's another concept. Acceptable, we said acceptable, valid, same idea, right? Something that has not been through the process, it's not even being proposed.
You mean to say should be, but
yeah, it's not even proposed. Maybe it's not. Maybe not even a candidate, but it's still a claim.
Maybe some people will disagree that it should be accepted. The whole point of the coupling.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm saying we may want to speak about what is a claim, and independent, like.
And I think that's what this is. This is what is a claim. This is the ideal of a claim, but this is not something we will use in a system. We need more useful entities, and that's why I'm saying this is the idea. Maybe
call it idea of a claim. Which is
let's call it claim for now, and let's see if we can find a name for the other one. The one I
need to remove the. Yeah, exactly. I think it's more useful to, whenever we talk of claims linguistically, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Essentially,
and we had a lot of work on defining this. This entity, I don't think, is going to exist in the system we're building. This is the broadest scope of what a claim is, and then in the system, depending on which part of the system we're talking about, we'll have to use more relevant nouns.
So I'm proposing talking about system claims as the union of accepted and candidate claims.
Yeah, I like that one because it makes very clear that this is a claim once it's in the system. So that's a good one.
Yeah, it's in proposed definitions now.
Oh, it is? Okay.
I just added it.
Is everything that's in the system already submitted or not? Can something be in the system without being submitted?
No.
It's in the system. It's been submitted.
You need to create cards from a template. It saves time.
Yes. Sorry. Then let's delete that one.
I will.
Go ahead.
Trello is doing that a lot lately. You remove the other one, you can copy paste what you had in there.
Yeah. It is a union type. It's as simple as that, and I'll get the pieces now. Where is, okay, that's accepted.
Yeah, I think that Yeah, a candidate not proposed. So
Oh yeah,
yeah.
you're absolutely right.
Candidate or accepted. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that works. And then later, if there's more adjectives you want to talk about, we'll probably include them here.
And candidate is here.
And claim is an intended domain type here, I would even say, because then you're full circle, right? Because that is. So I would even make that like explicit as domain type of claim. I would say as domain type of claim.
Okay.
And here we are.
And later, if there's like more refined claims, then we can still see whether here, whatever that's going to be. That's not a grammatical sentence.
Isn't it? That was submitted to the system, which is either a candidate or accept. Go ahead.
I simply removed the excess bit. Information was submitted to the system, which is either a candidate or
Accepted as the domain type of claim.
yeah, the as in the thing is annoying.
Maybe it should be candidate to. Candidate to the domain type of claim or accepted as the domain type of claim. Okay, now I can use that in usable claim.
Or accepted as. Yeah, I think it's correct.
And that is a noun, by the way.
No, the domain type doesn't fit in here, right?
Why not?
Why is it not an entity? It's not an adjective. System could be
No,
an adjective.
it's not accepted as the domain type of claim. It's accepted as a claim of domain type. No, wait. To the system as I think.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it more clear.
Yeah.
It's either a candidate or accepted, and the S will just have to ignore. Actually, I think you might be able to rename it. No, you cannot.
Good enough.
Yeah, that's clear.
Are we aligned on this?
I am, except that for it to be complete, we need examples. But
yeah, I mean, it's a union type. Do we really?
It's a
need
union
examples?
type.
Last time, watch out, because last time we said the same, and then we started looking at the examples of the union types, and that's when we discovered that we had errors, and then we reworked quite a bit. But if it's a union type, you should be able to copy examples from both. So let's just do that. I'll quickly.
I mean, I don't, technically we should use a pointer, because if we update,
it is a pointer. These are links.
No, Tim says like pointer to the examples, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. So the examples are the union of examples from candidate and accepted. Right?
Yeah, but ideally we don't update these too often, although history has shown differently. But
union for match and intersection for does not match, by the way, just to be pedantic.
Yeah, right.
The artist not flood submitted as a claim to claim. This is irrelevant here. Is it irrelevant? Probably not, but I'll keep it. Would not pass criteria. Well, let's make be accepted here. May not be accepted. Perhaps. Well, no, will not be accepted. Let's be clear. We don't want spam. Candidates likely to be accepted. Does not match.
I think the question form is the earth flat is a very good valid.
Yeah, but then it's still a candidate, so it would match.
Ah, you're right. Yeah, it's really the candidate examples that will be.
So I think this is correct. Let's double check. Uh-oh, that number has acceptance criteria. We have to remove that one, right?
Yeah, because it's included and accepted. And the third you have to remove also, because once it's accepted, it's accepted. So the intersection is very thin.
But regardless, I think that's fine. I think it's useful to do this. The best way to test definitions is by finding examples. I think this is good enough, though. These three.
Yep, good enough.
Yeah.
Timothy.
Oh, by the way, I disagree with you removing that case from candidate.
Uh-oh. Do I still have it in my clipboard? Why?
Because it's auto accepted, but that doesn't mean it's a valid candidate. If there's no acceptance criteria and they're unknown, but there is none, then it's not a candidate. It's auto accepted, which is different.
But now it says typically with associated acceptance criteria, which says that they're optional. And the example, I can add it as an edge case, right? But the example said without acceptance criteria, so I would say
or with no acceptance process, maybe we should say. And there you're right, it needs to be modified to if there's no acceptance process and things are auto accepted.
I don't have it anymore. Okay, can you say what it was?
A piece of information submitted for a type which has no acceptance process.
Agreed. Yeah, because we rewrote that and based on Felix's input, and now and then actually this one will probably also.
It is not a system claim because if it's then it's auto accepted and it enters in the accepted branch of the union type.
Okay. Felix, Timothy, how do you feel about system claim?
Looks good to me.
Yep, that's fine.
Oh my God, consensus in one go.
Or resignation.
And then you updated usable claim and immutable system claim. Yes, I think that works now.
That means like something that's still a candidate can still be used.
Yeah, in some systems, I don't want it, but yes, the usable claim doesn't dictate whether or not it's accepted.
That's a system choice.
Yes, and that's the
that's a contention.
That was the whole contention where we argued so long about, and now
because of progressive formalization, yeah. I can say something should be a proposal, an objection or support, even though it hasn't been through the acceptance criteria, the acceptance gauntlet yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Agreed.
The only thing that mattered for that user story was really the structurally linkable part, and I just confounded. Well, because for me, accepted things are structurally linkable, and they tied one to one. We had a lengthy discussion about it. Now we know they're two separate adjectives. So I think that's great progress actually in the past months.
It's the hour. I may want to go to another meeting.
Yeah, I think there's also a nice point to end. If Felix agrees with usable, then we
Yep.
have a lot of consensus.
Agreed.
We
Consensus.
didn't get to the user story list, but I think that's where we pick up next time.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. And I hope to see a lot of you Tuesday.
Yeah, can you repost it again? Or maybe
I will.
okay.
I'll make it.
Or just add it to the calendar.
Yeah, I could do that. I'm working on calendaring events, blah blah blah, right today, so it will happen.
Yeah, and Marco, when I added you to the YouTube thing. Is your ACM email your Google email, or should I
No,
add
it's
another one?
gmail.com.
All right, let me change that.
maparent@gmail.com.
Okay, yeah, I will do that, and then you have access.
Thank you.
Okay, then.
See you on
have a
Tuesday
great
then.
weekend.
See you on
Bye.
Tuesday.
Bye bye.
Bye.